Welcome to our second video of January 2022. This is one of our first example case videos, and it's a matter that for some reason has stayed with us for a long while. As I said before, a lot of people ask us things like, what is the worst case you've ever worked with? And what is, and it's always out of context, like, what do you mean worst? Most people are what, but some cases tend to stick with us. And one such case that for some reason stuck with us and that always comes back to memory, especially if we travel or move in the area, is a case involving a client of ours, and it's specifically the Nottingham family that approached us in this matter after we attended it as part of our natural duties. This happened on January 1st, 2004 at about 5:30 in the morning. It was on New Year's Day. It was a fairly cool day. It was early in the morning. The sun was just coming up. We heard about this call out on a place called Kragga, Kamma Road in Port Elizabeth, or Kragga as it's called today. We went out to the scene, and upon arrival we found that there were two vehicles involved. The evidence quickly suggested that it was a white Toyota vehicle involved and, funny enough, a pink Volkswagen Golf. Turns out two young ladies were traveling in their vehicle, the pink Golf at the time, and the young gentleman was traveling in the Toyota going in the opposite direction at the same time. From the evidence available at the scene, it was quite clear that he'd traveled around a right-hand bend. He ended up with his left wheels going off the edge of the road. We drive on the left side in South Africa, of course. And as he returned back into the road from having left the road slightly with his left wheels, he went into a sideways yaw, lost control, skidded sideways essentially over into the lane of approaching traffic and into the vehicle of the approaching young ladies. Now, when we arrived at the scene, we found the Toyota on the scene, and it was quite badly damaged on the left side, which made it quite obvious that the primary area of contact was on the left side. At the same time, there was the pink Golf, of course, that was involved. The pink Golf, on the other hand, was damaged on the front, the whole front, so the primary area of contact was on the front of the vehicle. And this, of course, meant that we had these two vehicles that were involved, but the two ladies had passed away in the motor vehicle. It's very sad and very unfortunate. As we arrived on the scene, there was a process of extricating the gentleman from the Toyota vehicle. He was being taken out of the vehicle, and the girls' bodies were removed from the vehicle, from their vehicle. Now, in and of itself, it's not a very terrible story. Two people have head-on collision, somebody passes away. But there were a couple of dynamics that made it unique. The first is, of course, it was a New Year's Day. So I can only imagine that this family would start no New Year without having some semblance of memory about the girls that passed away, the young ladies. And more importantly, and for a reason that stands out to us, they had their dog in the car, and unfortunately, even the dog passed away as a result of the impact. So this matter then proceeded to trial. The driver of the Toyota was charged criminally with culpable homicide, reckless and negligent driving, and whatever the other charges were. And I was actually called to testify in the matter. And this is one of our earlier cases where I learned a lesson, which is very important. And as people that know us and follow us would know, we have the so-called IBF protocol. In fact, you can go on training on Udemy and attend our course on the IBF protocol. And one of the aspects of the IBF protocol that's been included specifically is the so-called pedestrian paths and movements of pedestrians.
You also want to consider pedestrian pathways. You can be faced with a scenario in court where you have gathered all the evidence, you have collected all the pieces of evidence relating to the physical evidence. You've decided that you understand and know how things went down, and in court you are presented with a question, but Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, is it not possible that a pedestrian could have been walking across the road or exiting from a pedestrian pathway, thereby causing a sudden emergency for the driver, contributing to the collision?
In this matter, it was one of the earlier matters in which we made use of aerial photography and aerial photographs. We had a Google Earth image or something similar. I don't recall where we got it back then. And during my cross-examination, when I was being cross-examined, the attorney took me for defense, the young man's attorney took me back to my aerial photograph and said to me, if you look at the photograph to the right, can you agree with me that you see what looks like a pedestrian pathway? And of course I had to answer, yes, it is. And he said to me, but is it not possible that if there was a pedestrian pathway, that pedestrians would be using the pathway? And of course I had to answer, yes. The next question he asked was, and as they use the pathway, is it not also possible that a pedestrian could walk out in front of somebody driving there, and if they were to respond and swerve for that particular pedestrian, that is possible that they can lose control simply because of the sudden emergency? And of course I had to concede that too. If memory calls, and I'm not 100% sure, and unfortunately it's so long ago, and prior to major internet interest, I think he was found guilty, but it wasn't a jail sentence or anything. It was like a suspended sentence or something of the kind. But during the time of having to go back and testify, I flew down from Cape Town several times to testify. In fact, this trial was running in the St. Albans prison in Port Elizabeth. There's a court at the prison. And having traveled every time and with having interacted with the family, obviously you become aware of just how enormous the impact is on families. And it's kind of essential that you stay objective and you focus on the facts of the matter, but it's also at the same time impossible just to measure the impact these kinds of cases have on families. So this was a classic example of a case where you thought, or where we thought we had all the evidence, but there was an element that we didn't necessarily consider at the scene, and that then features, as I said, as part of the IBF protocol, specifically looking for pedestrian pathways. Now, I have a philosophy that whenever there is something new, unique, different or special that happens during a trial, and it alerts me to mistakes I might have made, that I immediately adapt. And our 124-point protocol that we've developed over the last 20 odd years, or even earlier, on account of the fact that it's been around for a while, is essentially based on a series of errors I've made. And all those errors I've made and the errors I've watched other people make, and the way in which evidence was presented has led us to where we are. So this is just a quick example of a case we've attended. There will be more. There are other cases that are much more dynamic, and they are much involve many more people. But this is just where I wanted to start. It's just the first case that jumped to mind, since it was one of our earlier cases. And as I said, there are other examples, and you can expect more of these videos. I hope this sheds some light on the kinds of things that happen and how they affect people, and more importantly, reminds people that when we speak of the IBF protocol in all of our videos, it's not something that came from somebody else or something that I found in a book and copied. The IBF protocol is literally a culmination of my experience, of the things we've done, the mistakes we've made, and the mistakes we've watched other people make. I hope that was interesting and entertaining. Well, I suppose no crash could really be entertaining, especially not where people have passed away. But when I say entertaining, I mean engaging. Thanks for your time, and see you in the next video.